I never got to ride with my dad. He was, as you can see, an avid maker of bits and restorer of all sorts of things. That's a secret, what's hidden under there. However, this little puppy, this is the one I've come to see today. So this is a 1954 BSA B31. It's a 350cc 4-stroke single cylinder with overhead valve. This bike started life as a box of bits, which my dad had purchased with a view to putting together, but sadly never got round to it. My family and I got together and we built this bike from nothing into what you see today. The engine was completely stripped apart and overhauled by my big brother in Scotland, bought down separately and put together on assembly day. This was Dad's thinking and looking chair. I think I'm going to be doing a lot of thinking and looking. So I guess the first thing to check is whether or not it still has lots of oil in and whether or not she's still got fuel in. Can't see any, but I can hear it sloshing about. Right, oil. Right, I've been told I shouldn't be able to see the top of the internal oil filter, just the top of the return pipe. It's a bit difficult to see and very difficult to film, but that, I believe, is the oil filter, so I shouldn't be able to see that. And when I look, the oil is only about there. Right, according to the manual, the oil tank holds up to 5.5 pints. There is definitely not 5.5 pints in there. So I have a little bit of oil left in here. I'm adding that. This is the fuel tap. Open is that way. Next you need to prime or tickle the carb. Tickled. Right, control wise, what have we got? Left hand clutch, decompression lever, front brake and ignition lever, which again cunningly labelled S for start and R for run. So we're going to stick her in S. Dad, if you're watching, I apologise for whatever is about to happen. Try not to laugh. Okay, she's in S. The fuel is on. We've tickled that. So I want to break her legs. Wait till she's stiff. Break the compression. Come to the top. Break the compression. And that's the top. This is where I try and explain to you the difference between a wet sump and a dry sump, using my favourite T. The sump is the lowest part of the engine, where all the oil runs to. In a wet sump, such as you'd have on your car, the oil that's not circulating around the engine comes to rest in the sump. This is usually measured by the use of a dipstick, where you can see how much oil is in your wet sump. A dry sump has different components: the sump, a pump and an oil tank or reservoir. The dry sump should only ever have a few ounces of oil in it at a time. When a dry sump is in use, the oil leaves the oil tank, goes round the engine, and some of it ends up in the sump. But at the same time, the pump pulls the oil back out of the sump and puts it back in the oil tank. In between the oil tank and the sump, there is an oil line. That's where the return valves or non-return valves should stop the oil from flowing accidentally between the oil tank and the sump. However, in an older bike, if it's been stood for any length of time, the seals that are in here may have become perished, and what can happen is the oil can accidentally drain How do you know if you've ended up with an accidental wet sump? Well, one indicator could be a lot less oil in the tank, but yet none on the floor. Others will be, when you get it started, might be a little bit smoky. Remember that for later. How do you deal with an accidental wet sump? Quickest and easiest way, take the plug out the bottom of the sump, drain all the oil, put it back in at the top. Alternatively, you can spend a really long time manually turning over, kicking all the oil from the sump back into the oil tank. It takes a really long time and is invariably pretty messy. He'll never know. Want a tea? Oh, girl. There's a bike in there somewhere. Well, Dad, I hope you're watching and I hope you're laughing, because I am absolutely soaked to the skin trying to start that bike.